It looks too big. Will it hurt? Seya whispered, her gaze fixed on Kivo's massive frame in the dim glow of their wedding night. He stepped closer, closing the space between them, and gently placed her trembling hand against his chest. "Trust me. I'll go slow," he murmured. What followed would shatter everything she thought she knew about men, about strength, about the depth of love itself. The stagecoach rattled to a stop at the edge of the Arizona territory, and Seya felt the ground shift beneath her feet. 6 long weeks of travel dust, silent strangers, had carried her across the West, leaving her questioning the wisdom of this daring choice at just 22. 3 months earlier, a letter had arrived in Boston, penned in formal English, by Kivo the Apache chief, a man seeking a bride from the Eastern world. Seya had laughed, then cried, then read it over and over. Her life in Boston had become unbearable. Rex's gambling debts had devoured her inheritance, and his wandering hands had turned her home into a prison. When the marriage broker offered her this impetiable chance, Seya had seized it with both hands. A fresh start, a new life, a husband so far from Boston, her uncle could never reach her. Yet now, standing under the relentless afternoon sun, dust settling around her worn leather boots, she wondered if she had fled one nightmare, only to step into another. "Miss Montgomery." The voice came from behind, deep and resonant, with an accent that carried the weight of something ancient and distinctly American. Seya turned, forgetting to breathe. The man before her was unlike anyone she had ever encountered in Boston, in the territories, in any illustration, any photograph from her sheltered life. Kivo was enormous, impossibly tall, towering over her by more than a foot. His shoulders seemed to eclipse the sun, and muscles rippled under copper skin that gleamed like burnished bronze. His chest was bare except for a leather vest hanging open, revealing a sculpted torso that looked carved by the land itself, each ridge precise and perfect. His face struck her with awe-high cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips hinting at amusement, and dark eyes that seemed to pierce straight through to the racing heart she struggled to conceal. Black hair fell past his shoulders, adorned with eagle feathers and beads of turquoise and bone, while a hammered silver medallion swung lightly at his throat. This was Kivo the Apache king, her husband. Seya's voice barely emerged. I am Seya." Kivo studied her slowly, his gaze tracing from her dust-stained traveling dress to her pale face, to the copper hair that had escaped its pins and now tumbled in wild curls. "You are smaller than I expected," he finally said, warmth threading the observation. Neither disappointment nor surprise. "You are larger than I expected," Seya replied, cheeks flushing instantly, and Kivo laughed, a deep rolling sound that vibrated through her very bones. "Come," he said, holding out his hand, palm up, waiting. "My people have prepared for your arrival. Food, water, rest." Seya looked at his hand, the calloused palm, the long, strong fingers, and felt the weight of choice pressing on her. She could turn back, find another stagecoach, return to Boston to face whatever awaited. Or she could take his hand, step into this unknown world with a man she barely knew, and trust that somehow it would lead somewhere worth going. Her fingers slipped into his. His grip was firm, warm, and surprisingly gentle. "Welcome to your new home," Seya, Kivo said softly. And in his voice she glimpsed the possibility that everything might truly be all right. The Apache village was unlike anything Seya had imagined. She expected crude shelters, harsh, unforgiving life carved from desert stone. Instead, a thriving community unfolded before her, wickiups arranged with care gardens of corn and squash, tended by women, moving with quiet efficiency, and children laughing as they darted through the afternoon shadows. Kivo led her through the village, hand in hand, as curious eyes followed. Whispered voices carried behind weathered hands. "They are surprised," Kivo said, reading her thoughts. "A white bride is unusual. Do they disapprove?" "They are curious," Seya admitted, "as you would be if a stranger appeared in your woods. But they will come to know you, and you them. Curiosity will turn to understanding." His words were simple but wise, his patience at odds with the raw power in his frame. They stopped before a wickiup larger than the rest, its entrance draped with painted hides, showing hunters, horses, mountains, and stars, symbols of a world Seya was only beginning to grasp. "This is my home," Kivo said, "and now it is yours as well." Kivo pulled aside the hide curtain and Seya stepped into the dwelling. The inside was far larger than she expected, warmed by strips of late-day sunlight slipping through the carefully built walls. Thick furs lay arranged for sleeping baskets and clay pieces lined the curved edges, and a faint breath of sage drifted in the air. "It's beautiful," Seya whispered, and she meant every word. "You're kind to say so." She turned and found Kivo standing in the entrance, his towering frame blocking most of the light, his features carved into shadow. He was enormous, so large it felt impossible he was real. Her heart kicked that same anxious flutter she had carried since agreeing to come west. "I'll leave you to rest," Kivo said, his deep voice softening. "Tonight, we'll share a meal. Tomorrow the ceremony binds us properly before my people." "Tomorrow," she swallowed. Does that trouble you?" "I thought—" She hesitated. "I assumed we were already married." "The papers I signed," Kivo's mouth curved into something that resembled a smile. "White man's papers mean very little here. What matters is the ceremony, the blessing of the spirits, the acceptance of the tribe. Until then, you're a guest in my home. Nothing more." He said it plainly, without pressure, without expectation, and something tight inside her loosened. "Thank you," she breathed. Kivo nodded once and turned to leave. "Kivo." He paused, glancing back over his shoulder, and once again she felt dwarfed by his sheer presence, as if he took up more space than the world allowed. Why, she asked quietly, why send for a bride from Boston? Why not choose someone from your own people? For a long moment he didn't speak at all. Seya wondered if she'd crossed a line she wasn't meant to cross. But then his voice came deep, old-weighted, with something buried far beneath the surface. "I wasn't searching for a woman who already knows what I am," he said. "I wanted someone who would learn, who would see, who would decide for herself what kind of man stands before her. And if she decides she does not want the life I offer—" He exhaled slowly. "Then she is free to go with enough gold to begin again anywhere she chooses. No debt, no burden, no chains." Seya stared at him, this giant of a man who spoke about freedom the way most men spoke about ownership. "You are not what I expected," she whispered. "And neither are you, Seya." And then he was gone, leaving her alone inside the wickiup with her thoughts, her fear, and the first fragile flicker of something she couldn't yet name. That evening the camp gathered around a central fire. Kivo's most trusted warriors and their families formed a wide circle, and Seya sat at his right hand, painfully aware of every look cast her way. She wore a deerskin dress they had given her, soft-beaded, nothing like the corsets and petticoats she had been raised in. The fabric moved with her light and easy, as if it belonged to the land itself. Kivo sat beside her, still bare-chested despite the cooling night, and her gaze kept drifting to him, to the lines of muscle, to the way the fire carved shadows over every ridge and curve. She had seen men before laborers in Boston, summer heat medical diagrams and forbidden books, but this was different. Kivo was different. He wasn't just large. He was powerful in a way that went beyond muscle power shaped by wind-earth survival, by a world she didn't yet understand. "You're staring." Seya flinched, nearly spilling the bowl of stew in her hands. "I'm sorry, no apologies." Kivo's voice dropped low for her ears alone. "I'm aware of how I must look to you. I'm aware Eastern women don't exactly consider me handsome." "No," Seya blurted too quickly. "That's not— I mean, you're—" She felt her face blaze red. "I'm what he asked," amusement flickering. "You're very handsome," she whispered, eyes dropping. "That's the problem." He said nothing for so long she forced herself to look up. His expression was unreadable. "You fear me," he said, not asking, stating. I'm afraid of many things, she admitted. You're only one of them. What else? This place, these people, this life I chose without understanding, the ceremony tomorrow. And what comes after? He repeated, what comes after, and the words made her stomach twist. I have never... She faltered, then forced it out. I've never been with a man, in any way. And you're... large? Kivo set down his bowl and turned toward her, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. Seya, look at me. She lifted her eyes. I will not touch you until you ask me to. Do you understand? But the ceremony, the tribe, doesn't that? No, he said firmly. A ceremony doesn't give me ownership of your body. Nothing gives me that. Your body belongs to you alone. That's not how marriage works in Boston, she whispered. We're not in Boston. We're not in Boston. Seya blinked, a flutter of something new stirring in her chest. You would wait, she asked softly. Even if you asked me to wait weeks, months, I would wait. Kivo's dark eyes held hers, and in that gaze, she felt her breath catch. Because a woman who comes to her husband's bed out of fear will never truly be his wife. I want no marriage built on fear. I want a partner. He continued, his voice low and steady, an equal. A woman who chooses me as I have chosen her. You have not chosen me. You've never met me before today. Seya's throat tightened. I chose you the moment I read your letter. The courage it took for a Boston woman to answer an Apache chief's proposal, it told me everything. You were running from something, yet you ran toward the unknown rather than remain in a prison of your own making. How did you know about the prison? She whispered. Because I've built prisons of my own, Kivo said quietly, and I recognize the marks they leave. Seya wanted to ask more, to understand what prisons a man like Kivo could possibly know, but before she could speak, a commotion flared at the edge of the firelight. Two young warriors, Nari and Talu, ran into the circle, faces, grim words, urgent and rapid, in the Apache tongue. Kivo's expression shifted instantly. The warmth drained away, replaced by steel and fire. He rose, all 7 feet of him, seeming to grow even larger, and spoke swiftly, his voice carrying authority that seemed to still the very air. What is happening? Seya asked. Raiders, Kivo said, jaw tight. From the south, Zaro and Fen, Mexican bandits who've terrorized the territory for months. They're only a day's ride away. Are we in danger? She pressed, heart pounding. Kivo's eyes softened for a fleeting moment. I will deal with this threat. You will stay here under the protection of my most trusted men. Kivo. This isn't a discussion, Seya said. This is who I am. This is what a chief does. I protect my people, he said firmly. He started to leave, but Seya reached out, fingers brushing his massive bronze hand. Come back, she whispered. Whatever happens, come back. Kivo's gaze flickered over her hand, small and pale against his immense fingers. I will come back, he promised. I have a ceremony to attend, a bride to properly marry. And then he was gone, striding into the darkness, calling orders to his warriors. Seya remained by the fire, her hand tingling where it had touched him, heart racing with fear, and something more she couldn't name. She barely knew this man. 24 hours ago, he had been just a name on a letter, a signature at the bottom of a proposal, an abstract idea representing escape. Now he was real, terrifying, impossibly wonderfully real. And out there, riding toward danger, while she sat safe and helpless, praying the morning would bring him home. The night stretched long and silent. Seya watched the dying fire, listening to the village stir in preparation for possible attack. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kivo, his massive form disappearing into the darkness. Warriors forming behind him, the silver medallion catching the firelight as he turned once more to look at her. Come back. She had whispered those words without thought, reached for him without planning. And now in the quiet of his home, Seya could not stop replaying it. the warmth of his skin, the size of his hand engulfing hers. His dark eyes softening for just a moment before the warrior mask returned. Dawn came slowly painting the desert in shades of rose and gold. Seya emerged from the wiki-up to find the village transformed. Women moved with quiet purpose. Children had been gathered at the center of camp. Warriors who stayed behind held positions along the perimeter faces, grave weapons ready. An older woman approached, silver hair braided with turquoise beads, face lined with wisdom from many seasons. "I am Tovi," she said, her English careful and clear. "I am grandmother to honor Kivo. He asked me to watch over you. Is there any news?" Seya asked, heart tightening. Tovi's dark eyes held hers with almost physical intensity. "The riders left south before moonrise. They will meet the bandits before they reach our hunting grounds. If the spirits favor us, they return by nightfall. If not, we mourn our dead and prepare for war." Seya felt her stomach clench. War. The Mexican bandits had grown bolder with each passing month. They raided villages, stole horses, took women. Kivo had tried diplomacy, had tried negotiation, but some men understood only the language of blood. "Has anyone been hurt before?" Seya asked, voice tight with fear. Tovi remained silent for a long moment. "Kivo, sister," she said finally. 3 summers ago, the bandits took her during a raid on our southern camp." Seya didn't need further explanation. The weight of that loss filled the air. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "That is why he fights. Always. Not for glory, not for conquest, but to make sure no family suffers as ours has." Seya thought of the patience she had seen in Kivo, the gentleness, the way he had promised to wait for her to never touch her without consent. Now she understood. He knew the cost of love taken, violated, broken. He would die before he let such harm reach anyone under his protection, including her. "He is a good man," Seya said softly. "I am only beginning to see it, but I see it." Tovi's lined face creased into something like a smile. "He chose well when he sent for you. At first I doubted a white woman from the east, soft hands, soft heart. What could she offer? An Apache chief. And now?" Seya asked, looking up at her. "Now I see what he saw," Tovi said, courage wrapped in silk, strength hidden beneath fear. A woman who runs toward the unknown rather than yield to the familiar. Seya shook her head. "I do not feel courageous. The bravest never do." A day passed agonizingly slow. Seya helped where she could. Carrying water, preparing food, learning the names of the women and children who would soon be her family. But her eyes never strayed far from the southern horizon, searching for dust movement, any sign the warriors were returning. By late afternoon, tension in the village had grown nearly unbearable. Seya found herself at the edge of the camp, shading her eyes against the dying sun. "They should have returned by now," she muttered. Unaware, she spoke aloud, until Tovi appeared beside her. "Patience, child. Kivo has never lost a battle. He will not start today." "How can you be so certain?" "I have watched him grow from a boy into a man. I've seen him face enemies twice his number and emerge victorious. I've seen him walk through fire and come out stronger. My grandson is not merely a warrior. He is a force of nature. But even nature can be defeated," Seya whispered. "Not this nature. Not today." Tovi's voice carried absolute conviction, and Seya desperately wanted to believe her. As the sun sank and shadows lengthened, the silence stretched into something that felt like grief. Seya prepared herself for the worst. Then riders. A shout rang from the perimeter guard and the village erupted into motion. Seya ran to the southern edge, heart in her throat, eyes straining through the deepening dusk. Emerging from the purple desert shadows came the warriors, dozens riding hard, kicking up clouds of dust in the last light of sunset. At their head was Kivo. He was alive. Seya felt her knees weaken with relief, tears pricking her eyes, something inside her chest she had kept closed for hours splitting open. The warriors thundered into the village, but the cost was clear. Several men bore bandaged wounds. 2 horses carried bodies draped in blankets, warriors who would never rise again. Kivo swung down from his horse like a man untouched by violence, moving with fluid grace despite blood streaking his chest and arms. His face set in hard lines that spoke of battles seen and endured in silence. His dark eyes scanned the crowd, and when they landed on Seya, at the edge of the firelight, something softened just slightly. The crowd parted before him as water parts for a stone, and Seya found herself frozen. Unable to speak or move, watching this mountain of a man stride toward her with long, purposeful steps. He stopped close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the copper tang of blood mixed with desert dust, and sense something beneath it all that was purely, unmistakably Kivo. "You waited," he said. "You asked me to. I did not ask. I hoped." Seya looked up at him, the blood drying on his skin, the exhaustion shadowing his dark eyes, the raw power in every line of his massive frame. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "None of this blood is mine." "Then whose?" Her voice hitched. "Who dared threaten my people, my home, my bride?" The word landed like a physical blow. "Bride," he said softly. "Not prisoner, not possession, not property. Bride." "The ceremony is tomorrow," Kivo continued, voice dropping softer. "If you still wish it." "Do you still wish it?" "I have wished for nothing else since I first read your letter." Seya felt her breath catch. "You do not know me. I know enough. I know that you crossed a continent to escape a life that was killing you. I know that you chose uncertainty over familiar pain. I know that you stood here waiting for a man you met only yesterday. And I know—" Kivo paused, and for the first time Seya saw a flicker of vulnerability pass across his rugged features. "I know that when I rode into battle, your face was the only one I could see. Your voice, the only thing I could hear. Coming back to you, that was the only thing that mattered." Seya's heart hammered so hard she was certain he could feel it. "We barely know each other," she whispered. "Then let us learn. Together. Slowly, for as long as it takes." He raised a hand and Seya flinched instinctively, years of Rex's cruelty etched deep in her bones. But Kivo's giant hand only cupped her cheek, warm, calloused, and impossibly gentle. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, with a tenderness that made her want to cry. "I will never hurt you, Seya," he said quietly. "I will never raise my hand against you. I will never force you. I will never take what is not freely given. This I swear on the spirits of my ancestors, on the blood of my fallen warriors, on everything I am and hope to become." "Why?" Her voice trembled. "Because I see you, Seya. I see the fear you carry, the wounds you hide, the courage it takes for you to stand here and let me touch you. I see it all. And I want nothing more than to spend the rest of my life proving that not all strength is meant to harm." Tears spilled silently down Seya's cheeks. "I am broken," she whispered. "I am damaged and afraid, and I do not know how to be a wife. I do not know how to be anything but scared." "Then be scared, be damaged, be broken, and let me stand beside you while you heal. Let me be your shelter, your protector, your partner, not because I own you, but because I choose you. And I will keep choosing you, every day for as long as you allow me." Seya closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her, letting the warmth of his hand anchor her to this impossible moment, this place, this reality, where a mountain of a man spoke like a poet and touched her as if she were glass. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Kivo. Tomorrow, tonight, right now, if you wish," he breathed. When Seya opened her eyes, he was staring at her with raw hope that stole her breath. "Tomorrow," he said, "the ceremony must be done properly, with witnesses, with blessing, with all the honor you deserve. And tonight, you rest." He glanced down at the blood streaking his chest. "I should probably bathe. A laugh escaped Seya, bright, unexpected, entirely genuine. That might be wise, Kivo said, a smile breaking through the hard lines of his face. His dark eyes softening, the warrior giving way to the man beneath. Come. He took her hand. Let me show you something. He led her through the village, past celebrating warriors and grieving families, past fires being lit and food being prepared, to a narrow path winding into the hills behind the camp. Seya followed, hands small and pale in his massive grip, heart racing with every step. The path opened onto a ledge overlooking the valley. Seya gasped. The desert stretched before them, vast, ancient, impossibly beautiful, painted in shades of purple and gold by the setting sun, with the village nestled like a jewel in its heart. I come here when I need to think, Kivo said. When I need to remember why I fight. When I need to feel small. Small. Seya looked up at him incredulously. You are the least small person I have ever met. Size is not the same as significance. This land has existed for thousands of years. It will exist for thousands more. I am nothing but a moment, a breath, a heartbeat in the life of something eternal. That is surprisingly philosophical for a warrior. Warriors who do not think, do not survive. I have had much time to wonder about my place in this world. Seya turned to him, and in the golden sunset he seemed less a terrifying giant and more a man who carried burdens she was only beginning to understand. Tell me about your sister, she said softly. Kivo's expression flickered, pain surfacing briefly, before he pushed it down. Ayana. She was light laughter, everything good in this world. When the bandits took her, something in me died. I am so sorry. It was not your fault. I know. But I am sorry nonetheless for your loss, for your pain, for the weight I carry. He was quiet for a long moment, then reached out, taking both her hands in his. You are the first person outside my grandmother who has ever spoken of her, who has acknowledged the wound, instead of pretending it does not exist. Why would anyone pretend? Because I am the chief. I am supposed to be strong, unbreakable, a pillar others lean on. Pillars do not cry. Pillars do not grieve. Pillars simply stand. That sounds exhausting. It is. Seya squeezed his hands, a decision forming in her heart. I do not need a pillar. I have had enough of cold stone in my life. I need a partner, someone strong when I am weak. Someone who lets me be strong when they are weak. Someone who grieves with me, laughs with me, builds something real, something human. Kivo stared at her, and Seya watched something crack open behind his dark eyes. You would want that? Kivo asked, voice low, questioning. A chief who weeps, a warrior who doubts, a man, not always certain of his path. I would want you, Seya whispered, breath-catching. The real me, he murmured, pulling her closer, not forcefully, not demanding, but with a gentleness that made her chest ache. Not the legend, but all of me, strength, weakness, courage, fear. Everything I am for, as long as you will have me. Seya leaned into his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek, the warmth of his arms wrapping carefully around her. She had arrived in Arizona expecting a transaction, a contract. Instead, she had found something far more precious, hope. And tomorrow she would become his wife. The thought no longer filled her with terror. Instead, it felt like the first step toward a future she had never dared to imagine. A future built on trust, not fear. On choice, not obligation. On love, not mere survival. As the sun slipped below the horizon, casting the desert in violet and silver, Seya closed her eyes and let herself believe that happiness might finally be possible. Morning arrived clear and golden, and Seya woke to find herself surrounded by women, Tovi among them, along with half a dozen others, whose names she was still learning. Carrying baskets, bundles, expressions brimming with barely contained excitement. What is happening? Seya asked, blinking the sleep from her eyes. We are preparing the bride, Tovi said, her face creasing into a gentle smile. Did you think you would marry the chief in your traveling dress? Before Seya could answer, She was swept to her feet and engulfed in a whirlwind of activity. Water scented with sage and wildflowers bathed her, her copper hair washed until it gleamed like morning fire. Oils were rubbed into her skin, leaving her soft and smelling of something ancient and sweet. Then came the dress. Seya gasped. White deerskin softer than anything she had ever touched, adorned with intricate beadwork and patterns of turquoise silver and deep crimson fringe, swaying like whispers with every movement. This belonged to Kivo's mother, Tovi said softly. She wore it when she married his father 40 summers ago. It has waited a long time for another bride. I cannot wear this, Seya whispered, awed. It is too precious, too important. You are precious. You are important. You are the woman my grandson has chosen. Tovi continued, the woman who will stand beside him, a chief's wife, the one who will carry his legacy forward. Tears pricked Seya's eyes. I do not deserve such honor, she murmured. Honor is not about deserving, Tovi said. It is about receiving and what you do with the gift once it is given. The women dressed her carefully, reverently, adjusting every fold, smoothing every wrinkle until the dress fit her perfectly. Then they braided her hair, weaving in feathers, beads, and tiny shells that clicked softly as she moved, transforming her from a Boston refugee into someone who seemed to belong here. When at last she saw herself in a polished copper mirror, she hardly recognized the reflection. The woman staring back was beautiful, not merely pretty, not simply acceptable, but beautiful. The dress hugged her curves in ways her Boston corsets never had, accentuating the swell of her chest, the narrowness of her waist, the flare of her hips, making her look like a woman, not a doll. Her copper hair blazed against the white leather. Her green eyes shone brighter, her skin glowed with the oils and desert sun. He will lose his breath. One of the younger women giggled. He may lose more than that, another whispered, and the group dissolved into laughter. Seya felt heat flood her cheeks, but could not help smiling. For the first time since fleeing Boston, she felt something like joy. The ceremony took place at midday in a clearing near the stream feeding the valley. The entire village gathered to witness. Seya walked toward the ceremonial circle on trembling legs, Tovi at her side, heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear. And then she saw him, Kivo. He stood at the center, dressed in ceremonial leathers, leaving most of his massive torso, bare copper skin, gleaming with oil. Black hair, adorned with cascading eagle feathers. A breastplate of bone and silver highlighted the breadth of his chest. Around his waist, a belt decorated with symbols Seya did not yet understand, but knew carried deep meaning. He was magnificent, terrifying, beautiful, utterly awe-inspiring, but it was his face that stole her breath. His dark eyes fixed on her, and in them she saw not hunger or possession, but reverence. Seya stepped forward, each pace drawing her closer to a future she could scarcely imagine. When she reached his side, Kivo extended his hand and took hers. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, he whispered, voice low, meant only for her. I am not certain I am awake. If this is a dream, I do not wish to wake. Kivo's lips curved into a smile that softened his fierce features, and Seya felt something click into place in her chest. This was right. This was where she belonged. The shaman stepped forward, an ancient man with clouded eyes and a voice like rustling leaves, chanting in the Apache tongue. Seya did not understand the words, but their meaning was clear. This was a joining, a binding, a promise made before the spirits, the ancestors, and all who had come before. Kivo whispered, close breath warm against her ear. He speaks of unity, of two becoming one without losing themselves. He speaks of the strength that comes from partnership, the power that grows when warriors stand together instead of alone. That is beautiful. It is truth, Seya said. The shaman produced a length of braided leather and with solemn ceremony wrapped it around their joined hands. This binding is not a chain, Kivo murmured. It is a choice renewed every day, every moment. A choice to stay together, to face whatever comes side by side. and if one of us wishes to leave, the binding falls away. We part free whole, owing nothing. Seya looked up at him, at this giant of a man who spoke of marriage not as ownership, but as partnership. I do not wish to leave, she said. Nor do I. The shaman continued chanting, and the tribe began to sing a low, haunting melody that rose from the earth itself. Seya felt tears streaming down her cheeks, felt Kivo's thumb brushing them away, the warmth of his body beside her, the strength of his hand around hers. When the ceremony ended, when the binding was removed and the chanting faded into silence, Kivo cupped her face in his massive hands and leaned down. May I kiss you, wife? The word sent a shiver down her spine. Wife. She was his wife. Yes, she whispered. Please. His lips met hers, soft at first, questioning a gentle brush that asked permission with every heartbeat. Seya rose onto her toes, pressing closer, answering only how she knew. Yes, yes, yes. The kiss deepened, fire igniting in her belly, her hands clutching at his chest, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her against him. He was so big, so warm, impossibly wonderfully overwhelming. When they finally parted, Seya was breathless, and Kivo's dark eyes had gone black with something that made her stomach flip. Tonight, he said, voice rough, we will finish what we have started. I am counting on it. His eyes widened, then he laughed, a deep rolling sound that vibrated through her bones. You continue to surprise me, Seya. Good. I intend to keep doing so, she whispered back. The celebration stretched all afternoon into evening food, music, dancing, stories, and songs, laughter and joy, the kind of community Seya had never known in her isolated Boston life. She met warriors who clasped her hand, welcoming her as sister. Women embraced her, calling her family. Children tugged at her dress, begging her to play. Through it all, Kivo stayed close. Hand at her back, eyes constantly seeking hers, a steady anchor amidst the swirl of celebration. Are you overwhelmed? He asked as the sun dipped and fires were lit. Yes, but in a good way. I have never felt so seen. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. You will always be seen here, Seya. You will always matter, not because you are my wife, but because you are you. You barely know me. I know enough, he whispered, and I will spend the rest of my life learning the rest. As darkness fell and the celebration continued, Kivo leaned close and whispered in her ear. Are you ready? Seya's heart stuttered. She knew what he meant. She knew what was coming next. Despite lingering fear, despite uncertainty, and the echo of Boston's dangers, she nodded. Yes. The wickiup had been transformed. Candles lined the furs and blankets, filling the room with warm golden light. Fresh flowers perfumed the air, and outside soft drumming provided a steady rhythm that sank in tune with Seya's racing heart. Kivo ducked through the entrance, his massive frame filling the space, blocking out the world beyond. They were alone, truly alone, for the first time since she had arrived. His voice was gentle, careful. We do not have to do anything tonight. The ceremony is complete. You are my wife in the eyes of the tribe. Nothing more needs to happen until you are ready. I know, Seya whispered. I meant what I said. I will wait for as long as you need. I know that too. She stepped toward him, reaching up to touch the breastplate across his chest. Help me understand something. Anything, she said. This, she gestured at him, at the impossible size of him. It looks too big. Will it hurt? The question slipped out before Seya could stop it. The same question she had blurted on their first night, the fear she had carried since first seeing the sheer scale of Kivo. His expression softened. You speak of my size. Yes, she admitted. You are very large in every way and perfect, he said. Perfect, she blinked. You are perfect exactly as you are, and I will not hurt you. I swear it on everything I hold sacred. How can you be certain? She watched him take her hand and place it flat against his chest over his heart. Trust me, Seya. I will go slowly. We will take all the time we need. If at any moment you wish to stop, we stop. No questions, no anger, no disappointment. You would not be disappointed. I would be honored that you trust me enough to try and patient enough to try again when you are ready. Tears pricked Seya's eyes. No one has ever spoken to me like this, she thought. Then everyone else has been a fool. He reached for the ties of her dress, then paused. May I? She nodded, unable to speak. His fingers worked slowly, carefully loosening the leather ties with a gentleness that seemed impossible for hands so large. The dress slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her feet, and Seya stood before him, in nothing but firelight and fear. Kivo's breath caught. You are... He shook his head. There are no words, he whispered, not in your language, nor mine, for what you are. Scared beautiful. Heartbreakingly, impossibly beautiful. He reached out, tracing the curve of her shoulder down her arm across her hip. Seya shivered, but not from cold. Your turn, she whispered. His eyes darkened. He removed his breastplate, the belt, and the leathers hanging at his waist until he stood before her as bare as she was. Her breath stopped. She had known he was large. She had not known he was this. Every muscle defined with impossible precision. His shoulders could block the candlelight, his chest a landscape of ridges and valleys that her fingers ached to explore. Trust me, he said again. I will go slowly, piece by piece. You will get used to my strength. Promise, I promise. He pulled her close, lifting her as if she weighed nothing, carrying her to the furs. Then with patience, gentleness, and a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, Kivo showed Seya that some things worth having were worth waiting for. That strength can be soft power, can be gentle, and sometimes the thing you fear most becomes the thing you cannot live without. Later curled against Kivo's chest, Seya's body hummed with sensations. She had never imagined her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Are you all right? He murmured, his hands stroking lazy patterns on her back. I am perfect. No pain, she asked. None. Only what she propped herself on one elbow, looking down at him in the candlelight. Only wanting to do that again, Kivo's laugh rumbled through his chest, vibrating through her entire body. You are going to be the death of me, wife. But what a way to go, she whispered. He pulled her down for a kiss, and Seya melted into him, into this impossible life she had stumbled into. She had arrived in Arizona expecting survival. She had found something far better home, and as the candles burned low and the drumming faded into silence, Seya, now fully part of the Apache village, closed her eyes and let herself believe this happiness was real. It was hers, and nothing could take it away. 3 months had passed since the ceremony. Seya had become someone she no longer recognized, not because she had lost herself, but because she had finally found herself. The terrified Boston refugee seemed a distant memory, replaced by a woman who walked with confidence through the village, greeting neighbors by name, speaking enough of the language to hold simple conversations, and knowing enough of the customs to feel she truly belonged. Her days were full. She worked alongside other women, learning to prepare food in ways Boston had never taught her. Tanning hides, weaving baskets, and creating the intricate beadwork that adorned everything from clothing to cradles. Her hands, once soft and pale, had grown calloused and capable. Her skin, once porcelain, now glowed golden under the desert sun, and her heart, once frozen with fear, had thawed completely under Kivo's love. Every night he came home. Every night he held her close, whispering words in Apache that she was slowly learning to understand. Every night she fell asleep in the arms of a man who treated her as the most precious thing in his world. It was more than she had ever dared hope for. It was everything. But Seya was learning that happiness rarely came without a price. The first sign of trouble arrived on a crisp autumn morning in the form of a letter carried by a government courier. Seya was helping Tovi sort dried herbs when a rider appeared, his blue uniform stark against the sun-baked desert face, grim beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Tovi's curiosity shifted to concern, then to something that verged on fury. The exchange was brief. The courier departed, and Kivo stood alone in the center of the village, a crumpled letter clenched in his massive fist, jaw tight with controlled rage. Seya went to him immediately. "What is it?" she asked, hand on his arm. "What has happened? The government," he said, voice low and steady in a way that frightened her more than shouting ever could. "They are renegotiating the treaty. They want our land, all of it. They are giving us 6 months to relocate to a reservation in the north." Seya felt her blood run cold. "Can they do that?" "They can do whatever they choose," Kivo said. "They have the army, the weapons, the law on their side, a law written without our consent. But this is your home. Your people have lived here for generations." "That means nothing to them," he added. "We are obstacles to progress, savages to be moved, managed, and forgotten." Seya had never seen him like this. The careful control she knew so well was cracking the weight of his responsibility, pressing down like a tangible burden on his broad shoulders. "What will you do?" she asked. Kivo was silent a long moment. "I will fight," he said finally. "Not with weapons, not with blood, but with words, treaties, every legal avenue available. I will go to Washington if I must. Speak to Congress, to the president, anyone who will listen. And if no one listens—" His dark eyes met hers. In them, she saw the warrior who had charged into battle against Mexican bandits, the chief who would die rather than abandon his people. "Then I will find another way. There is always another way. Let me help," Seya said. He blinked. "What let me help? I know the white world. I know how they think, how they negotiate, what persuades them. I was raised in Boston society. This is not your fight, Seya. It became my fight the moment I became your wife. Your people are my people now. Your home is my home. I will not stand by while everything we have built is threatened." Kivo stared at her, and slowly the rage in his eyes softened into something else. Wonder, gratitude, love. "You continue to surprise me," he murmured. "I told you I would," she said. "Now let me see that letter." The weeks that followed were the hardest of Seya's life. She threw herself into the fight with everything she had, writing letters to politicians and newspapers, reaching out to contacts from Boston society, crafting arguments that framed the Apache cause in terms white America could understand. Kivo traveled to meet government officials, his presence and eloquence, earning grudging respect even from those who had dismissed his people as savages. Together, they were a formidable team, the Apache chief and his Boston bride fighting side by side for the survival of their home. But the government was slow and the army impatient. As winter approached, soldiers began appearing at the edges of Apache territory, waiting a silent threat growing more ominous by the day. The tribe grew restless. Some younger warriors wanted to fight to drive the soldiers away with arrows, blood, and fury. Others wanted to flee to hide in the mountains, hoping the army would not follow. And Kivo, caught between his people's fear and the government's demands, grew thinner, grayer with each passing week. Seya watched him struggle, carrying the weight of his nation on those massive shoulders, and loved him more fiercely with every day that passed. "You are not alone," she reminded him night after night as they lay together in the wickiup. "Whatever comes, we face it together. I do not deserve you," he whispered. "You deserve far more than me, but I am what you have, and I am not going anywhere." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Seya had written to a New York newspaper editor, Jorv, who had once published pieces sympathetic to Native causes, pleading for coverage that might sway public opinion. She expected nothing. She received everything. Jorv arrived in Arizona 3 weeks later, accompanied by an illustrator and a photographer determined to tell the Apache story to the world. They spent 2 weeks in the village interviewing elders, documenting traditions, capturing images that would show Eastern readers the humanity they had been taught to deny. When the articles were published, everything changed. The story of Kivo the Apache chief and his Boston bride captured the nation's imagination. A romance that transcended cultural boundaries. A love story proving that the Apache were anything but savage. Letters flooded congressional offices, church groups organized protests. Influential voices demanded the government honor the original treaty. Slowly, grudgingly, the pressure began to work. The final resolution came on a bitter December day, 6 months after the original letter had arrived. A new courier appeared bearing documents sealed with the president's mark. Kivo read them in silence, face unreadable, jaw tight with controlled fury. Seya waited, heart in her throat, hands trembling at her sides. When he finally looked up, tears glistened in his eyes. "We keep our land," he said, voice breaking. "The treaty stands. The reservation order has been rescinded. We keep our home." Seya threw herself into his arms. Kivo caught her, lifted her, spinning her around as the village erupted into celebration. Against all odds, against the might of the American government, against centuries of injustice and broken promises, they had won. That night, as the village settled and the fires dimmed, Kivo led Seya to their ledge overlooking the valley. The desert stretched below vast ancient and bathed in silver moonlight. "I have something to tell you," Seya said before he could speak. His brow furrowed. "What is it?" She took his hand, placing it flat against her belly. "We are going to have a child." Kivo went completely still. For a long moment he simply stared, dark eyes wide, his massive frame frozen. "A child," he whispered. "Our child. Yours and mine. You are certain Tovi confirmed it this morning. I wanted to wait until we knew about the land before telling you. I did not want to add to your burdens. Add to my—" He shook his head and suddenly laughed, that deep, rolling sound Seya loved more than any music in the world. "You have not added to my burdens. You have given me the greatest gift I could ever receive." He dropped to his knees before her, pressing his forehead against her belly. Seya felt tears stream down her cheeks. "Hello, little one," he murmured against her skin. "I am your father, and I promise to spend every day making this world safe for you, making it worthy of you." Seya ran her fingers through his hair, feeling the feathers and beads woven through it, sensing the strength and gentleness that defined everything he was. "We did it," she whispered. "We saved our home, and now we will fill it with family." Kivo rose, cupping her face in his massive hands. "I love you, Seya. I loved you from the moment I read your letter. I loved you more when I saw your courage. And I love you most now, knowing you have given me not just a wife, but a partner, a warrior, a mother for our children. I love you too, Kivo. I did not know what love was before I came here. I thought it was something from stories, something that happened to others. But you have shown me it is real, that it is possible, that it is worth fighting for." He kissed her, then deep, slow, full of promise. Seya kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into that moment, fear overcome love discovered, hope for the future. When they finally broke apart, Kivo pressed his forehead to hers. "What do you think?" he asked. "A boy or a girl? Does it matter?" "Not even slightly," Seya said, "as long as they have your courage, your strength, your kindness, and your wisdom. They will be formidable." He laughed softly. "Ah," she said, "they will be loved. That is all that matters." 9 months later, on a warm spring morning, Seya gave birth to twins. A boy with Kivo's dark eyes and her copper hair, a girl with her green eyes and Kivo's fierce spirit. Kivo held them both in his massive arms, tears streaming freely. "What shall we name them?" Seya asked, exhausted but radiant. "The boy Ahote. It means restless one because he kicked so much I could feel it across the room. The girl Ayana, after my sister, so her spirit may live on and never be forgotten." Seya reached out, touching his face. "That is perfect. You are perfect. All three of you. My family. My heart. My home." Tovi appeared in the entrance of the wiki-up, her weathered face wet with tears. "The tribe wishes to see them," she said. the children of the Apache king and his Boston bride, the first of a new generation. Kivo looked at Seya for permission. She nodded. Together they stepped into the morning light, Kivo carrying their children, Seya walking at his side. The tribe had gathered. Hundreds of faces turned toward them, and when they saw the twins, a cheer rose that seemed to shake the mountains themselves. Seya looked out at the crowd, at the people who had become her family, at the land that had become her home, at the man who had become her everything. 1 year ago, she had been a terrified refugee fleeing Boston with nothing but a letter and a fragile hope. Now she was a wife, a mother, a member of a community that had welcomed her without hesitation. She had come seeking escape. She had found belonging. She had come seeking survival. She had found love. And as the sun climbed higher over the Arizona desert, painting the world in golden rose hues, Seya of the Apache held Kivo's hand and smiled. This was her happy ending, not because it was easy, not because it was perfect, but because she had earned it, fought for it, chosen it every single day, and she would keep choosing it, keep fighting for it, keep earning it for the rest of her life. Kivo pulled his bride close, kissed the top of her head, and together they walked forward into their future. A future built on courage, a future built on trust, a future built on love. Somewhere in the desert, when the spirits of those who had gone before whispered their blessing, Seya had crossed an entire continent to escape her past. She had every reason to turn back when she first saw Kivo, a man so powerful he could have broken her with a single hand, yet she stayed. She trusted him, and that single choice had changed everything. Now let me ask you something. If you were Seya standing in that desert facing a giant who promised gentleness, but looked like war itself, would you have stayed? Would you have placed your hand in his and walked into the unknown, or would fear have won? Most people never take that chance. Most stay trapped in their own version of Boston, in situations that slowly destroy them, because the unknown feels more dangerous than familiar pain. But not Seya. And maybe not you either, because you are still here. You watched this story. You felt something when Kivo dropped to his knees and spoke to his unborn child. You felt something when they won the fight to keep their home. That feeling, that warmth in your chest, that is hope. And hope is the first step toward change. This channel is built for people like you. People who believe in love that defies the odds. People who understand that the greatest stories are the ones where broken souls find healing in each other's arms. Every week we bring new tales of passion and courage, of warriors and the women brave enough to love them, of obstacles overcome and hearts transformed. If Seya had given up at the first sign of fear, she would have missed twins with copper hair and dark eyes. She would have missed saving an entire nation. She would have missed the love of her life. What might you miss if you turn away now? There is a subscribe button just below this video. One click, that is all it takes. One small act of faith, just like Seya placing her hand in Kivo's. You do not know what stories are coming next, but I promise they will be worth it. So the question is simple: are you brave enough to stay? Subscribe now and let us walk into the unknown together. Because the best love stories, the ones that truly change us, are never found by those who turn back at the first sign of fear. They are found by those who stay. Be one of those who stay. We will see you in the next story. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deepfake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work.